What you're about to witness is one of the most brutal, one of the most shocking, and one of the most career-altering moments in recent wrestling history. A friendship shattered, a rivalry ignited, and one man left broken, battered, and questioning everything he thought he knew about the person he once called his brother. This is the story of how Alister Black unleashed absolute devastation upon Damian Priest, leaving him severely injured and the WWE Universe asking one haunting question: why? But before we get to that moment of destruction, we need to understand how we got here. Because this wasn't just a random act of violence. This was calculated. This was personal. And this was inevitable. Let's rewind the clock. Picture this: two of the most enigmatic, the most intense, and the most physically gifted superstars in all of professional wrestling standing side by side. Alister Black, the Dutch destroyer with a striking style so devastating it could end careers, and Damian Priest, the Archer of Infamy, a man who combined raw power with an unpredictability that made him one of the most dangerous competitors in any ring he stepped into. These two had history. They had respect. Some would even say they had a bond that went beyond the squared circle. But respect in wrestling? That's a fragile thing. And bonds? Well, those can be broken with a single betrayal, a single moment of weakness, or in this case, a single misunderstanding that spiraled completely out of control. Now, you might be thinking, what could possibly cause two men who seem to understand each other so well to turn on each other so violently? The answer is never simple in wrestling. It never is. Because in this world, ego, ambition, and pride collide with friendship and loyalty every single day. And when those forces collide, someone always gets hurt. The tension between Black and Priest had been building for months. It started subtly. Little comments here and there during backstage interviews. Priest would talk about his victories, his momentum, his rise through the ranks, and Black would be standing in the background, arms crossed, that haunting expression on his face that seemed to say, "I'm watching you." At first, the WWE Universe thought nothing of it. These were two intense individuals. That was just their nature, right? But then came the match. You know the one. That triple threat where Black, Priest, and a third competitor tore the house down for 30 minutes of absolute chaos. The kind of match that has fans on their feet, holding their breath with every near fall, every close call, every moment where it seemed like any one of them could walk away with the victory. And in the final moments, when Black had the match won, when he was about to deliver his devastating Black Mass kick to seal the deal, Priest intervened. Not to help Black. To win the match himself. The arena erupted. Priest pinned their mutual opponent and celebrated like he'd just won the championship of the world. But Black? Black didn't move. He sat in the corner of the ring, eyes locked on Priest, watching every second of that celebration. And if you were paying attention, if you really understood the language of Alister Black, you could see it. The betrayal. The calculation already beginning in his mind. The darkness starting to consume whatever remnants of friendship might have existed. Priest tried to explain it away the next week on television. He came out to the ring, microphone in hand, and he said something that would seal his fate. He said, "In this business, it's every man for himself. Black knows that. He taught me that. So if he's upset about what happened, he needs to look in the mirror and realize that I just beat him at his own game." Those words echoed through the arena. And somewhere in the back, Alister Black heard every single syllable. The disrespect wasn't just in what Priest did. It was in how he justified it. It was in how he smiled while he said it. It was in how he acted like taking advantage of Black was some sort of accomplishment to be proud of rather than a betrayal to be ashamed of. The following weeks were electric with tension. Every time Black appeared on screen, the crowd would chant for confrontation. They wanted to see him get his hands on Priest. But Black? He stayed patient. He stayed silent. He would appear in the shadows during Priest's matches, just watching. No interference. No attacks. Just that presence. That psychological warfare that Black had mastered better than almost anyone in the business. Priest started to crack. You could see it. The confidence that had defined him was being replaced with paranoia. He'd win matches, but instead of celebrating, he'd immediately scan the crowd, the entrance ramp, the rafters, looking for Black. Commentary would speculate endlessly. Was Black playing mind games? Was he waiting for the perfect moment? Or had he actually moved on, and Priest was just being paranoid? Then came the announcement that sent shockwaves through the WWE Universe. Black versus Priest. 1-on-1. No disqualifications. No count-outs. No escape. The match was set for one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year, and the anticipation was suffocating. Social media exploded with predictions, with speculation, with fan-made posters and dream scenarios. But nobody, and I mean nobody, could have predicted just how dark things were about to get. The weeks leading up to the match saw both men prepare in their own ways. Priest trained publicly, posting videos of his workouts, his striking drills, his preparation. He was confident. Maybe too confident. He kept saying in interviews that he knew Black better than Black knew himself, that he understood the darkness Black carried because he'd carried some of that darkness too. He was wrong. Black prepared differently. He disappeared. No social media. No backstage interviews. The only time anyone saw him was during his entrance for matches, and even then, he'd finish his opponents quickly, efficiently, and with a level of brutality that seemed to escalate with each passing week. It was like he was sending a message to Priest. Every kick that knocked someone unconscious. Every submission that made grown men tap out in seconds. Every emotionless stare into the camera after a victory. It all said the same thing: you have no idea what's coming for you. The night of the pay-per-view arrived, and the atmosphere in that arena was absolutely electric. You could feel it the moment you walked through the doors. Fans were buzzing with anticipation. Signs everywhere. Some supporting Priest, calling him the future, the next big thing. Others supporting Black, calling him the reckoning, the end of days for anyone who disrespected him. The energy was split, but the excitement was universal. This was going to be special. This was going to be violent. This was going to be unforgettable. When Priest's music hit first, the reaction was mixed but loud. He walked out with that swagger, that confidence that had defined his entire career. He was dressed in his gear, looking every bit like the warrior he claimed to be. He played to the crowd, raised his arms, pointed at fans in the front row. But if you watched his eyes, really watched them, you could see something else. Nervousness. Maybe even fear. Because in a few moments, he'd be face to face with the man he betrayed, and there would be nowhere to hide. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness. The kind that makes your heart skip a beat even when you're expecting it. And then that theme music hit. Alister Black's theme is unlike anything else in wrestling. It's haunting, it's aggressive, it's the sound of something ancient and dangerous awakening from a deep sleep. And when the lights came back up and Black was just sitting there in his signature pose on the stage, the arena lost its collective mind. The walk to the ring felt eternal. Black moved with purpose, with focus, his eyes never leaving Priest. There was no playing to the crowd, no acknowledging the fans. Just that intense, unwavering stare that made it clear this wasn't about entertainment. This was about punishment. This was about making an example. This was about inflicting pain. The referee checked both men, called for the bell, and for a moment, neither competitor moved. They just stared at each other from opposite corners of the ring. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The crowd was on their feet, phones out, cameras recording, everyone wanting to capture what was about to happen. And then Priest made the first move. He stepped forward, microphone somehow in his hand, and he started talking. "You really think you're that special, Black? You really think you're some kind of..." He never finished that sentence. Black exploded across the ring with a speed that defied logic for a man his size. The microphone went flying. Priest tried to defend himself, but Black was already on him with strikes that echoed through the arena. Forearms, knees, kicks, each one landing with sickening precision. Priest stumbled backward into the corner, and Black didn't let up. He was relentless, striking with a fury that shocked even the most hardcore fans in attendance. Priest managed to shove Black away and create some distance, but the damage was already done. His nose was bleeding. His eye was already starting to swell. And the match had barely started. The commentators were already speculating about whether Priest had underestimated just how angry Black really was. They were right to speculate. What followed was 25 minutes of absolute warfare. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. This wasn't a wrestling match in the traditional sense. This was a fight. Priest would mount comebacks, using his size and power to throw Black around the ring, hitting him with massive strikes and power moves that would have finished most opponents. But Black kept getting up. Every single time. Sometimes he'd even smile through the pain, which only seemed to make Priest more desperate, more frantic. The match spilled outside the ring multiple times. Black drove Priest into the barricade so hard that the metal bent. Priest returned the favor by powerbombing Black onto the ring apron, the hardest part of the ring, and the sound of Black's back hitting that surface made the entire front row wince in sympathy. Steel steps were used as weapons. The announce table was cleared but never broken, somehow surviving as both men fought around it, on it, and nearly through it. There was a moment, about 15 minutes in, where it looked like Priest might actually pull it off. He hit Black with his finishing move, the Reckoning, and the crowd thought it was over. The referee counted 1, 2, and Black kicked out with such force that Priest went flying backward. The look on Priest's face was pure disbelief. How do you beat someone who won't stay down? How do you defeat someone who seems to thrive on the punishment? Black started to take complete control around the 20-minute mark. He caught Priest with a jumping knee strike that sent Priest stumbling into the ropes, dazed and confused. Then Black started systematically breaking Priest down. He targeted the legs first, kicking at Priest's knees and thighs with those devastating strikes that had ended so many careers. Priest tried to fight back, tried to create space, but Black was everywhere at once. The crowd was split. Some were chanting for Black, recognizing his dominance and his technical mastery. Others were chanting for Priest, hoping their hero could find some way, any way, to survive. But there was a third group, a quieter group, who weren't chanting at all. They were just watching with mouths open, realizing they were witnessing something special and something terrible at the same time. Then came the sequence that everyone would be talking about for weeks, months, maybe even years afterward. Black had Priest in the center of the ring. He measured him, stalked him like a predator circling wounded prey. Priest was on his knees, bleeding, exhausted, barely able to keep his eyes open. And Black just stared at him. For what felt like forever, he just stared. The referee asked Priest if he wanted to continue. Priest, through sheer pride and determination, nodded yes. That might have been the worst decision of his career. Black delivered Black Mass, his devastating spinning kick, and it connected perfectly with Priest's jaw. The sound echoed through the arena like a gunshot. Priest collapsed immediately, and the referee moved into count. But Black stopped him. He literally pulled the referee away from making the count. The crowd was confused at first. Why wouldn't Black just end it? Why prolong Priest's suffering? Because ending it quickly wasn't the point. Making a statement was the point. Black pulled Priest to his feet, which was no easy task considering Priest could barely stand. He positioned him in the corner, and then he unleashed a combination of strikes that will be replayed on highlight reels forever. Knees to the body, elbows to the head, kicks to the legs. Each strike perfectly placed, each one building on the damage of the last. Priest tried to cover up, tried to defend himself, but there was nothing he could do. He was trapped. He was helpless. He was at the mercy of a man who had none to give. The referee finally stepped in, trying to pull Black away, trying to tell him that enough was enough. Black ignored him completely. He hit another Black Mass, this one even more vicious than the first. Priest's body went completely limp. He collapsed into the corner, sliding down until he was sitting on the bottom turnbuckle, and he wasn't moving. The crowd was silent now. This had gone beyond competition. This had become something else entirely. Medical personnel rushed to the ring before the match was even officially over. They surrounded Priest, checking his vitals, shining lights in his eyes, trying to assess the damage. Black finally stepped back, but he didn't leave the ring. He stood in the center, watching the scene unfold with that same emotionless expression. The referee never counted the pin. He never raised Black's hand. He was too busy helping the medical team figure out how to safely get Priest out of the ring. It took several minutes to stabilize Priest enough to even consider moving him. During that time, Black finally left the ring, but not before delivering one final message. He grabbed a microphone that had been dropped at ringside, looked directly at the camera, and said just 4 words, "This is who I am." Then he dropped the microphone and walked away, disappearing into the back while the chaos continued in the ring. Priest was eventually helped onto a stretcher. The crowd gave him a standing ovation, respecting his toughness, his heart, his willingness to fight even when he was clearly outmatched. But the ovation was tinged with concern. This didn't feel like a typical wrestling injury angle. This felt real. The way the medical personnel were handling him, the way they were being so careful with his neck and head, the way Priest wasn't responding to their questions with his usual cocky demeanor. Something was genuinely wrong. The following episode of WWE programming opened with an update on Priest's condition, and the news was sobering. Multiple injuries, concussion protocol, facial fractures, severe bruising and swelling. He was going to be out of action indefinitely. The announcers delivered the news with genuine concern in their voices, and they showed highlights of the attack that had put him in that condition. Watching it back in slow motion, seeing every strike land, seeing the accumulation of damage over 25 minutes, it was almost hard to watch. But what came next might have been even harder to watch. Alister Black appeared on the screen in a pre-recorded interview. He was asked about Priest's injuries, about whether he had any regrets, about whether he felt he'd gone too far. His response was chilling in its simplicity and honesty. He said, "Damian Priest made a choice when he betrayed my trust. He made a choice when he disrespected what we had built together. And I made a choice about how to respond. I don't regret my choices. I never have. I never will." He wanted to learn what darkness really looks like. Now he knows. The WWE universe was divided. Social media exploded with debates about whether Black had crossed a line, whether this was the kind of storyline wrestling should be telling, whether real injury should ever be part of the entertainment. But others argued that this was exactly the kind of intensity and realism that made wrestling compelling. That action should have consequences. That betrayal should lead to punishment. That sometimes the good guy doesn't win and the bad guy doesn't get what's coming to them in a neat, satisfying package. Weeks passed. Priest remained absent from television. Updates were sparse, but when they came, they painted a picture of a man who had been fundamentally changed by what happened. He wasn't just healing physically. He was dealing with the mental and emotional trauma of being destroyed so completely by someone he'd once considered a friend. Sources close to Priest reported that he was questioning whether he even wanted to come back to wrestling, whether the pain, both physical and emotional, was worth it. Black, meanwhile, became even more dominant. He moved through opponents like they were nothing. Title opportunities started coming his way. He was being positioned as one of the most dangerous men in the entire company. And he never mentioned Damian Priest again. It was like Priest had been erased from his memory, from his consciousness. The message was clear: you're not even worth thinking about anymore. I destroyed you, and I've moved on. But wrestling has a way of coming full circle. It always does. Because about 2 months after the attack, during a major pay-per-view event, something happened that nobody expected. Black was in the ring, having just successfully defended his newly won championship. He was celebrating, the crowd was going crazy, and then the lights went out. When they came back on, Damian Priest was standing on the entrance ramp. He looked different. Harder. The cocky smile was gone. The playful attitude that had defined him was replaced with something colder, something more focused. He had a microphone, and when he spoke, his voice was different too. Deeper. More controlled. More dangerous. "You thought you broke me, Black. You thought you ended me. But all you did was show me who I need to become. All you did was burn away everything weak about me and leave behind something you should be afraid of. Because I'm coming back. And when I do, you're going to wish you had finished the job when you had the chance." The stare down between them, separated by the length of the entrance ramp, was absolutely electric. Black's expression never changed, but something flickered in his eyes. Not fear. Not exactly. But perhaps recognition. Recognition that he might have created something he couldn't control. That his attempt to destroy Priest might have instead forged him into something more dangerous than he'd ever been before. The crowd was on their feet, chanting, screaming, losing their minds at the prospect of these two going at it again. But this time would be different. This time, Priest would be the one with nothing to lose. This time, Priest would be the one seeking revenge. And in wrestling, a man seeking revenge is the most dangerous kind of opponent there is. So where does this leave us? With one of the most intense, most personal, most brutal rivalries in recent wrestling history still unfolding, with Alister Black